Good morning. My name is Balsam. I'm the National Coordinator of Independent Jewish Voices Canada, a grassroots organization with 23 chapters in cities, regions, and university campuses across the country. I'm here today as part of the newly formed Coalition Against Antisemitism, Anti-Palestinian Racism and Islamophobia to address some very serious concerns with the anti-Semitism study ongoing at the Justice Committee, which is going to meet in about a half an hour. We came to share our perspectives in person due to the exclusion and the gatekeeping by the committee of voices that publicly oppose Israel's treatment of Palestinians, and in particular, its ongoing genocidal war in Gaza. And just overnight and yesterday, we saw the devastating attack on the displaced persons camp in Rafah. Indeed, nearly all of what we have heard so far in the committee has been about opposition to Israeli government action and the political ideology of Zionism, despite being framed as anti-Semitism. Of course, we do see incidents of anti-Semitism, just like the shots fired in the school in Toronto, which of course was terrible. We're therefore deeply concerned this committee will serve mainly to bolster the extreme pro-Israel positions and agendas of MPs like Anthony Housefather and conservative MP Melissa Lantsman, and lead to harmful policy decisions that risk making Jews less rather than more safe. After all, when anti-Semitism is conflated with anti-Zionism, it perpetuates the idea that Jews and support for a settler colonial apartheid state are one and the same. But it isn't and cannot be just about us Jews. Palestinians and their supporters have been facing attack and repression on campus for decades. And I hate to say that much of that repression has come under the guise of the so-called efforts to fight anti-Semitism, such as the controversial IHRA definition, which has shamefully been adopted by several levels of government in Canada, including the federal government. So we must, as a society, tackle anti-Semitism. But we can't do it in isolation. The key is to ensure that whatever approaches are taken are interconnected and developed in conversation with other forms of racism, especially anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia, not in silos and not by privileging certain voices over and at the expense of others.
Just this morning, Israeli forces bombed a tent camp housing displaced people in a designated safe zone in Rafah. 45 Palestinians murdered. This is the horrifying reality of this genocide. I stand here in front of you, a student of Concordia University, member of Independent Jewish Voices Concordia, and on behalf of the countless Jewish students who firmly oppose the ongoing violence that is being carried out in our name. After listening to the first witnesses, it would falsely appear that Concordia is a university that fosters anti-Semitism. The assertion that Concordia and its large Arab student body is unsafe for Jews is Islamophobic, racist, and an erasure of our experiences. As anti-Zionist Jewish students, we wish to set the record straight. A witness mentioned the March 4th speaker event in which 3 high-level reservists were invited to give a speech. One of the speakers, Abi Volkovich, referred to Palestinian children as terrorists in an attempt to justify the murder of thousands of children by the Israeli military. All 3 speakers have continued to defend the mass killings of Palestinian civilians as proportional defense to the attack on October 7th and deny responsibility for committing war crimes. It was for reasons like these that the event was moved off campus, not because of anti-Semitism. The encampment at McGill University has also been falsely represented in these hearings. Jewish students have been present at the encampment since the very first day. It has become an incredible space for learning, knowledge sharing, creativity, and community building. We feel safe in our community, but we have been harassed by Zionists every day. On May 2nd, several Zionist organizations called for a counter-rally at the encampment. IJV members formed a line at the front to keep campers safe, but we were taunted for several hours. Survivors were forced to watch graphic videos and harassed by rape threats. Counter-protesters distributed flyers titled "Humanitarian Message to All the Girls and Women in the Pro-Hamas Encampment." The flyer's ostensible concern for the women in the encampment was filled with racist, Islamophobic remarks about Palestinian and Arab men, as well as misogynistic comments about female survivors of sexual violence. The distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is incredibly important. Painting a picture of the Canadian Jewish community as Zionist is itself anti-Semitic. This is what the adoption of the CAAARI definition would legally ratify. We firmly oppose and fear the suggestion that several other university students have made in these hearings. The Jewish community is not a monolith. One of our strengths of our ethno-religion is our diversity. When anti-Zionism is conflated with anti-Semitism, a vast diaspora of voices are silenced. We advocate for our love of Judaism and for collective Jewish and Palestinian liberation.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Rück. I'm a professor in the Department of History and Institute for Indigenous Research and Studies at the University of Ottawa, and I represent Faculty for Palestine, the chapter at the University of Ottawa. We are faculty members who are working for boycott, divestment, and sanctions to end Israeli state oppression of Palestinians, and we're currently supporting students at the Palestine Solidarity Encampment. More than 200 faculty, librarians, and faculty and staff at the University of Ottawa, St. Paul's University, Concordia, and Carleton University have signed a solidarity statement in support of the encampment, which is located at the University of Ottawa, but which is supported by folks from all of these universities. As a professor who teaches history and the history of settler colonialism, and strives to engage students with experiential learning opportunities, I see the students at the U-Ottawa encampment doing exactly what I hope for them in my classroom. Learning history together, teaching each other, and discovering how to have difficult conversations while respecting each other. These hearings have misrepresented these encampments as places of hate and anti-Semitism. In reality, students have set up an excellent research library, hold daily teach-ins, and invite guest speakers to discuss all aspects of the current situation. These students are practicing anti-racism, inclusion, diversity, decolonization in a meaningful way. They are diverse people of many backgrounds, including Palestinians and Jews, coming together to oppose oppression, dehumanization, settler colonialism, apartheid, genocide, and war. This is experiential, self-motivated learning at its best, and the students at the encampments are giving us a glimpse of what a better world might look like. I, along with hundreds of other faculty members at Ottawa University, stand with the peaceful and principled students, and we support their reasonable demands, and we call upon our university leaders to listen and act accordingly. We, like them, stand against all racisms, including anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinian racism. And the work we're doing as professors and human beings requires us to oppose internationally recognized crimes perpetrated by Israel while opposing anti-Semitism and every other kind of racism. Thank
you. Good morning. My name is Dyala Hamzah. I'm a professor of Arab history at the University of Montréal and a member of the Palestinian Canadian Academic and Artist Network. If you wanted to prove that there is no climate change or that fossil fuel industries are environmentally friendly, you'd set up a panel composed exclusively of climate change deniers. Similarly, individuals and organizations testifying at the anti-Semitism hearings were selected to establish a self-fulfilling prophecy that there is no genocide in Gaza, so protesting Israeli genocide is anti-Semitic, that there is no such thing as anti-Palestinian racism in Canada, only anti-Semitism, and that Zionism is even Palestine-friendly. Yes, even such delusional claims were made during the student hearings. To not include non-Zionist Jews, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, and other stakeholders is ethically bankrupt. Methodologically, it is also glaringly flawed. Politically, it bodes disastrously for Canada's revised anti-racism strategy. Indeed, to not see the connection between systemic support for Zionism and anti-Palestinian racism is to deny the documented fact that Canada is home to a flourishing Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism in which pro-Israel fringe right groups are key players. Also, the same systemic support for Zionism is fueling, not fighting, anti-Semitism. The deliberate conflation by Canada of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism assumes that Judaism and Zionism are mere equivalents. Canada has to see its own hand in that which it purports to fight. At fault is the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, the implementation of which IHRA Special Envoy Lyons and B'nai B'rith Director Robertson are aggressively advocating at post-secondary level. To that end, universities have been described as ground zero of the anti-Semitism problem and are being accused of not doing enough for Jewish students and not implementing the law or their own rules. We even heard someone saying that universities are, as of now, being put on notice. This is a distorted view which the donor-driven university president testifying this afternoon will hopefully debunk. Given the composition of the hearing panels, these presidents, who otherwise profess neutrality, should have actually refused to testify. May they remember today that faculty unions across the country have massively rebuked IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and that they are in the process of adopting boycott, divest, sanction resolutions.
Thanks. I'll just finalize with a few summary recommendations from our coalition. So the first is to promote and adopt an intersectional, interconnected approach that analyzes anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian racism, excuse me, and Islamophobia together, rather than siloing them, or worse, pitting them against each other, as these hearings have done. Do not force the adoption or adherence to the IHRA definition, which stands to harm both Jews and Palestinians and their supporters. Integrate understanding of anti-Palestinian racism into the policy recommendations, which includes recognition that mislabeling critique of Israel or support for Palestine as anti-Semitic, quote unquote, is itself a form of anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia. And finally, stand up for academic freedom, including freedom of conscience and expression for university members, as well as the protection of institutions from government interference. Thanks. And we'll take questions.
Hi, Rafa Bujikanian, CBC News. In the news release and in your remarks today, you hinted at a list of people you had presented to the committee who were not selected to testify. Can you talk about who those experts are and what were they told when they were not selected? Were they given any reasons? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. So quite a number of faculty and a few, today is the deadline, and a number of other organizations are getting in written submissions, but I should say earlier on, when it comes to being selected as witnesses, we were in touch with several of the parties, and, you know, yeah, it was I think we did have a bit of a push from at least one of the parties there to get us on board, but that didn't happen. And in the end, we had, yeah, I mean, it was basically a monolithic group with the same opinion. Yeah, in terms of, again, the individuals, I mean, we had professors that are experts in issues of anti-Semitism, people really drawing on statistics and facts and things like that, which again were things that were absent largely from those hearings.
Party that was trying to get you there?
I prefer not to mention, actually.
And you mentioned how the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is problematic. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. So at Independent Jewish Voices, we've engaged in a campaign now since 2019 to oppose the IHRA definition. The main problem are the examples. Seven of the 11 examples that are accompanied with the definition have to do with Israel. And several imply that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. For instance, saying that Israel is a racist endeavor. So that's being used to say that, for instance, saying Israel's practicing apartheid is anti-Semitic, even though, that's something that is said by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, various things such as that. So that's being used and weaponized to really shut down speech and critical thought around Israel-Palestine. And Dyala, do you want to add anything on that?
I think, you've said the most important thing. The idea that we should have a definition to actually delineate what can be said and what cannot be said about Israel-Palestine is, of course, an affront to academic freedom. I'm speaking here as a professor, of course, as an academic. And this is clearly the mission of Special Envoy Lyons. And we have, good reasons to be extremely worried about her attempts to force down our throats this definition that has been rejected by over 40 faculty unions across the country, by CAUT, the Canadian Association of University Teachers, by FQPPU, la Fédération québécoise des professeurs et professeurs d'université. So I think it's time government heard what academics, what civil society is saying about this definition, which is, even when it has not been implemented, is so much around that it has already produced a self-censorship environment. People are self-censoring and organizations are censoring even without having adopted the definition. So many events have been cancelled that have to do with Palestine. So many colleagues have been asked to shut up because of Palestine, because of this definition. So you can imagine what this is going to lead to if this definition was to become part and parcel of the rules of universities, if it was to become compulsory for academics to comply with.
Okay. Just as a next move, will the coalition try to take part in the committee hearings that study Islamophobia? Is that a thing you want to do to make sure your voices are heard?
Yeah, we have requested to appear for the Islamophobia hearings as well. No one has been notified as to whether or not they will appear, and several of the submissions that are being prepared as well have to do with that. So we'll see if we can get some of our perspectives in there as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Just with respect to just one added piece with respect to the IHRA definition, some of what we're concerned of is there's a handbook coming up soon to apply IHRA across the country, and also several of the recommendations talked about basically using IHRA as a filter for government funding across the board. That came from B'nai B'rith. So again, quite a few concerns across with respect to the application of IHRA.
If you are on Zoom and have a question, please use the raise hand function. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Si vous êtes sur Zoom et avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée. Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.